Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Building for Peace with Hannah Jewell. Today, we're having the podcast via Zoom because I am interviewing an incredible young lady who's based in Turkey. And while the podcast is Sussex-based, her current project is related to a project I'm working on myself. And she's got so much to share. I just really wanted to bring her on. So this is Katherine Hreib. She's an American like myself, and she's living in Turkey. She has studied sustainable development and the philosophy of religion at Columbia University. She has worked for the United Nations in an initiative called Religions for Peace. And as part of this, she worked on violence against Muslims in the state of Tennessee and also on permaculture with those communities there in Tennessee. As part of her work with the United Nations, she was an environmental coordinator where she created a network of 200 interfaith groups. And through this, she began to study more into agriculture and farming and spirituality. She's done research with the Multinational Exchange for Sustainable Agriculture, which is the acronym MESA. They work with dry farming and no dig. They're based in California, and they continue to support her research. Katherine's current interest is researching communities which specialize in spirituality and agriculture, or which live with both of these aspects fully embodied. And it is this research which led her first to India and then to Turkey, where I have had the opportunity to meet her. So welcome today, Katherine, to the podcast. It is such a joy and a delight to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's brightening my day.
I can see the sun coming in, and we're here at the beginning of March with the start of spring. Tell us a little bit, Katherine, about some of your projects.
I live right now in Seki, Turkey, which is an area in the south of Turkey near Fethiye. It's about an hour inland from the city, from the ocean. And we live nested in something in Turkish is called a yayla, which I've come to learn means it's a valley. So it's a flat area in a mountain range. So it gets full on winter, full on summer, and it's at a higher elevation. And the reason I moved out here about 6-7 months ago is because there's a community, a Rafai Sufi community out here that is looking to start agriculture project and also a sort of heritage and lineage project on land that was recently acquired in a mountain close to here. The mountain is a very special area. It faces Pir Abdul Musa, where his shrine is, and also where many blessings have come from. So it's a special location to the community. And the vision has been that there will be a very extended ceremony of music and whirling and prayers. And before we even get there, the idea is that people would be able to stay there continuously, maybe for up to 3 years. So food systems come before we start dreaming too much about these prayer celebrations, because we need food to fuel our prayers, and we also need to pray to the earth there so that we are welcomed, and we have mutual benefit that comes out of this ceremony. We have to make friends and all these things, just like planting plants. So this is the reason I moved out here. The process is slow because we're working in a community, and details get changed, and the world is changed, and we are even yesterday meeting some families from the Ukraine that just crossed the border on the first day of the war. So there's so many different ways that we're holding each other that the Community Land Project has to incorporate these daily acts of giving and sharing and meeting each other. So in the meantime, also, there are other projects that will develop. There's members of the community that are starting their own farms, and people are lending hands to them. I'm also in the process of searching for land to create sort of like a base camp for this project where we can create a tree nursery and do some hands-on learning before we move up there long term or for a longer term ceremony. And I think the process right now is, some people say, gathering the troops. We're seeing who is interested enough to stay, who has what types of knowledge that we need: architects and farmers and families and people with muscles and people who can read astrology charts. And we never really know what we need, but we're asking slowly and receiving people day by day. So this is the trajectory of the project so far.
Wow. It's a fascinating project and one that I'm involved with as well. That's how Katherine and I met. And the land up there is so breathtaking. The air is fresh. And there's just a sense of possibility. And I know everyone around the world is talking about starting community, but there are not many places where it can actually happen. For example, here in the UK, obtaining land is rather challenging. So it's so exciting to see that moving ahead there. And I really appreciate how you've brought forward the intermixing of peoples that comes in times of war, which has been going on for centuries. But Turkey is right there in the middle where such intermixing has happened on many occasions. How is this landscape related to a mixing of peoples, a mixing of faith, and this meeting of spirituality and earth?
This is a great question, and it's the reason that I came here in the first place. You're 100% correct that Turkey is in this very interesting location, and it's also a new nation. We have to remember this about nations, is that nations are written and rewritten actually all the time, but we live these lives that are, 100 years if we're lucky, and that means that we don't get to see many of these redrawings of borders or shifting. Migration has happened all throughout history. I imagine this, even before there was history written and recorded, there's history written in the earth. And there's shifts of the tectonic plates, and there's shifts of animals, there's shifts of weather patterns, and now we see shifts of people, and this is something that we can conceptualize more, and something I think we feel more in our hearts. And I can't explain why that is totally, but I share a heart just like we all have hearts. So maybe this is why this vibration of suffering and movement is something that is more tangible to us. Also, many of us have the experience of leaving home, even if it's just for a semester of school or just for school or few years, or making a move permanent to find a place that welcomes us and that seems more suitable to our interests and to our safety. And this is also something that now with the where we're seeing the war in Ukraine, Russia, and it's making me also reflect on how it is that each of us has this in us a bit. I don't mean to say like conflict within us. This is true as well, but also the trauma of movement and the trauma of being relocated and unwelcomed and being sort of pushed around without knowing why or without having a say in it ourselves. This has happened to both of my parents, actually, which is why they came to the United States. And when I first came to Turkey, I had a question in my mind to return to this part of the world where my parents are both from. My mom is from Greece and my dad is from Lebanon and born in Syria. And something pulled me back here. But I can't say that this is an individual experience. I think we all sort of follow our callings to return to a land or to a place that's more comfortable. Now, when I am actually around the community, I see many people traveling from all over the place. Last week, we were sitting in Sopot in conversation with the community, and there are people from Russia, the Ukraine, Canada, Oman, Jordan, Palestine, Australia, really all over the place. And actually, I think we're seeing more of this. The question is, of course, are people going to stay and be able to contribute to one place long term? That's one question. And another question is that eventually it will become like a multinational homeland, whatever we're building, whatever sorts of communities we build. They will be, I imagine, multilingual, multicultural, interfaith, because we're seeing that this is an experience we all share of movement and of having to learn from each other, not just for the purpose of not getting into fights, but also we realize that there's so much more to learn from conversation, from moving to a new place, because we grew up in only one place where we get one type of information. So I think we're becoming richer, actually, as we come together. And the richness of each of us will become even richer once we have a place to start planting that into the ground and making it even more visible. So having a land that we can then work on together, it shows us our fruits. It shows us what we can do and also shows us where we need to work. And this is the beauty of having a place that we can work on together with people from many different places.
I really love this image of that diversity being planted in the ground and made visible. It brings to mind the ancient seeds and their diversity. And for example, the ancient ears of corn in the Americas were made of many, many colors: blue, reds, yellows, whites, oranges, kernels, all together. And when we think of these people coming together to bring their seeds and unifying that towards, the shared purpose, which is just to live in harmony and peace. How we come to unity and peace is really a grounded and practical effort. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how interfaith work marries up or bridges with permaculture and with work with the land, and sort of the different regions that you've worked across the world. As you said, each one of us comes from the place that we were born, that we know, and this is like the seed that we're bringing to this collective pot and this collective awakening. So when those seeds start to mix, what are some of the wonders and joys? What are some of the challenges? And what are some of the most touching elements you can bring forward for us in this moment?
This is a great question, and something I can't fully articulate. It's the reason I've been following things for a while now is, for some reason, I became interested in religion and ecology around the same time. And I knew these things were together. Actually, one of my first experiences of this was I saw a statue of Jesus walking through the desert with the wind hitting him, and he was walking as a shepherd. And I said, yes, well, of course, historically, even religious figures are living in places that aren't cities. I mean, yes, cities, Medina and areas like this, but we have to also remember that there's this element of being in touch and talking about nature and understanding that even the wind is not in my control at all. And these are things we have to surrender to. So this is the starting place of it. I think similar to that is the reason I've enjoyed interfaith conversations is because it also has to do with this idea of surrendering. And it has to do with to each other and also to these problems that we're identifying. Because even if we come from different areas, we can see the same things that are not going right. And if we can see those things, we can say maybe we don't get along usually, but let's now sit together. And that's what really made me interested in doing interfaith work, is that it was a bringing together of different perspectives. And not only perspectives, it's this, I was interested in working with people who were already, I guess, surrendering to something that they don't know. They don't know why the world is always the way it is. We don't know always where we get the power we get it from. And I liked that that was the starting ground for the conversation. I also like interfaith because it doesn't mean always a melding together of identities. It doesn't mean this like, let's do things one way and just become similar to each other. It means that we can still hold our traditions and learn from each other and teach other people what our traditions are and enhance our vocabulary about how we talk about the world, but still remain in our tradition. And this is important because when you choose a path or when you're born into a culture, actually, as you go deeper into that, you open up things that are hidden, information that comes to you specifically based on where you came from and where you're going. So it's important also that everyone sort of holds on to the path of their own. From there, then more answers come. Let's say I was working with a group in Bengal, and a river, the Yamuna River, which is part of the Ganges River, had dried up and it wasn't flowing anymore. So they put together an interfaith group, and this means there was Christians, there were Muslims, there were Sikhs, there were Hindus, and they came together every morning and they started with a prayer and they ate breakfast together, and then they cleaned the trash from the river. And they did this for 2 years, and the water started flowing again. So this is something that is incredible and actually is a story that I think about often when I think about this work. And it has many elements to it. As I said, it's a problem that everyone can see. It doesn't matter what your identity is. Actually, you can see that the river stopped flowing. So the choice is then, do we do something about it or we don't do something about it? It's also, as an individual, when you see trash in a river, you can say, I wish someone would clean that up. Does that mean I clean it up? It's a really big task for one person. So you do need that solidarity. And I think also there's a lot to be said about the power of prayer and the power of bringing intention from many different directions onto one thing. And in that process, you do healing that extends beyond what the ecological problem is you're also healing between people in communities where there is conflict and historical conflict and violence and things that we don't even understand. You know, sometimes we bring together people of two nationalities and we don't understand why there's animosity between us. And it doesn't really have to do with us as people, but as things that we've inherited as protection and not protection. And we have to just spend more time together. And that element of prayer and work, I think it helps clean our hearts. I think it helps clean our energy so that we can be more effective.
Yeah, that was so beautifully said, Katherine. There's a concept I think about all the time called meeting at the well. And it just highlights how water traditionally is the center of a living space, whether it's a home or village or a town or community. And when we bore wells to get our water to take to our home rather than having pipes and taps in the home, there was this way of coming to the well and taking your turn for water and the very sacredness of that act, you know, carrying the water. Without water, we can't be alive. We can't cleanse ourselves. We can't cook. And sharing the water with that person who maybe you are having a little tiff with, and being kind to each other. This meeting at the well actually ameliorates so many of the problems we can sometimes identify with and sort of melts them. And the river kind of brought these people together in such a beautiful way. water is so important to us in the coming decades and generations. It's just foundational. And one thing that I really looked at is the sacredness of ecology and the sacredness of our relationship to water. And that's dealt with so differently in different religious perspectives. How might you speak to us about sacredness, ecology, water, and these very different religious viewpoints?
I have to say that this year, actually, I feel a little bit humbled by this idea, water is life, because it's been in the public consciousness for now since 2016, around that time. And this is when we saw Standing Rock at protest camps. And this idea is not new, but it was elaborated in a way that had more than just words. It was protest camps. It was getting people unified. And even I went to Oshadisha Cohen and for a brief period of time. And that also was really helpful to see, just to witness these changes and this expression and this consciousness that's growing. And I will say that only this year, now that we have this community land, did I really realize why water is so important. I think without land and without knowing that food needs to be grown, I knew it, but I didn't know it really deep down. And maybe I still don't know it totally. But now we have this community land and we don't have a well up there. And so for the past 6 months, I've been thinking, how are we going to farm up there without water, which I know is possible. And that's actually where my farming training comes from, to do dry farming. But it puts this extra challenge on it. And then this winter, we were blessed with so much snow. I mean, in US calculations, maybe 4 feet of snow, and now it's slowly melting. And snow is really important because it means it's slowly infiltrating into the earth, meaning that this is not rain that's going to run off the mountain. This is snow that's going to slowly become a reservoir underneath the surface. And in Turkish, they call rain, they sometimes say rahmet, which means mercy. And so they're really referring to the precipitation from the sky as mercy. And this year it is like this. And when we talk to the villagers around here, they say, we haven't seen this rain, this precipitation like this for maybe 7 years. So as we're looking to start this community land project, as even I'm looking to find land, it seems like a perfect moment that all of this precipitation has fallen and is now in the earth, and the earth is holding that. So this is a rahmet for sure. This is a mercy, because during COVID, I think one thing I was paying attention to from the start of it is how I imagine the earth to be so much smarter than each of us. I don't imagine that I know that to be true. And I know that there are ways that it was reconfigured during COVID. And I wonder how much of that benefited Mother Earth during that time. We saw early stories on where there was dolphin sightings, where there hadn't been dolphins in many years. This year we saw much more rain. We saw a reduction of shipping and air traffic for a time, which means there's less emissions in the atmosphere. The wind patterns aren't being changed as much by our motion. And so there's some element of resetting, of recalibration. So when I saw all the precipitation this year, I say I believe that this is part of a bigger movement of the earth. And we'll work with it because the time has come, the rain has come, so now we start.
So, as I look for a link between consciousness, ecology, and the concept of sacred and this really practical working, I'm just reminded in the very beginning of our talk how you spoke of surrender. Mm-hmm. And the water has come as mercy, so now we start. This is surrender to the rhythms of the earth. In what ways does working with the earth actually transform and evolve our consciousness beyond our capacities of imaginings? As you were speaking of these interior places opening up through the spiritual experience and through the really rooting into your tradition or your path, I feel equally when we root into the earth practically, there's spaces that open up inside of us.
Yes, yes. This is, I will only try to articulate this because I'm not sure I can say that much. I hold on to the Quran to guide me in many ways, and to point out things that I don't always notice. And there's a surah in that, Ar-Rahman, which is the merciful, and it describes everything in pairs. It describes functionings, day and night, and all of these things that are working together like this. And in some ways, I think that even without a book that says this to you, as you spend more time with the earth, just taking walks, you notice these things. A wind has come from this direction. What time does the sun set today? I can maybe remember based on the past few days and just feeling what these cycles are like. So I think that there's this element that the religions have really tapped into, and as you follow a path, which can be through a book, through the prayer times in Islam, which is you pray before the sunrise and at sunset, and times throughout the day. And these times I don't believe are arbitrary at all, actually. You pray before the sunrise, and I think many traditions do this, actually. They advise to be awake early in the morning, and sit through that transition, which is an amazing thing. And until the sun comes up, or when it just breaks. And this is a really potent time. And unfortunately, many of us sleep, myself included, during this time, but this is an extremely potent time. There's no wonder that this is called upon for you to wake up during that time. And then the next time, in this tradition, in Islam, the next time you pray is around midday, maybe 6 or 7 hours later. You've done a lot of your work maybe in that time, and now you pray. And then you pray again in the afternoon. And I actually think this afternoon prayer is really important because it connects the day. Because the afternoon is oftentimes when we say, oh, we're feeling low energy, we need coffee or things. But this prayer is like coffee in a way. It's saying, let me sit in my heart, let me sit inside and regenerate for that rest of the day. And take account of this day that has transformed from this morning where I saw the sun break, and now it's about to go the other way. And again, this next very potent time is when the sun is setting. And then after that in the evening. And the reason I say this is because the prayers are built into the cycle of a day, but I think as you just watch the day, even without having this instruction to pray, these moments of the day, the sunrise and the sunset, they take you, you want to sit and watch that transition happen. And they wipe your mind. They sort of cleanse you in that moment. So I think these are the sorts of things that help bring us deeper, is when we recognize that the cycles that are happening on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, yearly basis, and in our lives are leading us deeper into observation. I think when we go further and we start working with plants, this is the next element that always blows me away. This idea of just sprouting an acorn, caring for something like this. Yesterday, I shared a story with someone. It's her story, it's not mine, but she told me that she had just come from the Ukraine, and she told me that she was planting a row of beets, and her neighbor saw her planting beet seeds and said, let me just plant one next to you and help you. So her neighbor just planted the seeds in a separate row than her, and she was planting. And every day, she had a child, so she's sitting on her porch and taking care of her child, and this woman would come every day to just say hi and have a chat. But every day before she went to visit her, she stopped at this beet rows, and my friend was saying she saw this woman just sitting there, squatting next to them, sort of talking, just wandering around every day. And she said within 3 months, this woman's row of beets were so much taller than her row. She said most of her seeds didn't even sprout. And this is not even to say anything of the spiritual, but of the caretaking, of the love that we're spreading. So this is another element of observation, is if you love something and if you take care of something and you nurture and you revisit it, even without trying so much, it will open up for you. And I think sometimes when we push and we say, why isn't it opening up? Why isn't it opening up? It's sort of like these plants, as they have these cycles of their own. And all of a sudden, boom, the leaves come out. Almost as if magically overnight. We don't even understand why it is all of a sudden that happens. So this, I think, is, as you spend more time in the garden, in the nature, in the day, and also walk the spiritual path, maybe these sorts of information, realizations, this love is developed in a similar way.
There's so much in what you've just said, and I'm really appreciating the attunement to cycles and rhythms as a way of grounding the spiritual life. That sacredness is actually not so much a philosophical concept, while it is, but it's a lived concept, and that lived concept is very tied to the earth herself. You know, like in India, I have a friend from Kerala, and he says that there are still many temples in his region where they get up before sunrise and they stand in front of the temple as a community, and they do the little hand drums for Shiva until the sun is up. And in the North American tradition, indigenous tradition, it is considered the most powerful time to pray, just before the sunrise. And this cleansing our hearts, you know, if as we come together in unity and as we look to build communities and networks of communities and interfaith initiatives and permaculture initiatives, it's really a matter of cleansing the heart to be able to consistently show up to that. So, like for myself, if I was going to go to an interfaith initiative, I might have a lot of willpower for it at first, but to live it week after week, month after month, year after year, without losing hope, sort of necessitates that kind of rhythmic purification. I'm really curious, Katherine, how you have come to embrace Sufism, and you speak so lovingly about your relationship with the Quran, and this is the tradition you've chosen to root in. And this land is not an accident, being with the Rafi community. So how did you wind up in this place?
I think it's my ancestors calling me. This is how I think about it. I wish it to be this way, and I believe it to be this way. My father is born in Aleppo and grew up in Lebanon, but on his father's side, they grew up in Islam, but they grew up also in Sufism. My father's grandfather was a farmer and also a mediator for a Sufi community. So people, when they were having problems, they would come to him to speak. And I only knew a very little amount about this when I was growing up, but somehow religion was quiet in my household, but it still was there in a way that I was curious about. My mom also is Greek Orthodox, and her life, she's held tightly onto religion in the way of, I would say, more things having to do with miracles and questions opening up and wondering why difficulties come into our path, and always even speaking to me about, moments when rain came, and these were very mystical things, and she was able to communicate it, even though they only came as, so rarely. But that is something she holds with her. And my father also has this history in his family. And I think that this is not unusual, actually, for people carrying this, even when we live in secular societies. So at a young age, I knew I wanted to learn more about Islam. And as I was doing all of my work in ecology and in interfaith, I eventually quit everything. And I said I wanted to find out two things. Is I wanted to learn how to combine music, dance, and prayer. So I knew I was heading to go study with the Bowels in India. But before that, I wanted to stop and learn more about the history of my family with Islam. And so I actually pretty randomly was invited to a sema, a 3-day sema. And after staying awake the whole, 24 hours for 3 days, I was living in Greece at the time, and I said, I'm going to leave everything there, and I'm going to go and learn about this music. So I sat outside a cafe where someone was giving lessons on tambor and bağlama every day. And I sat out there every day, and I would study Turkish a little bit. And after he finished giving lessons, we would just sit and maybe have a coffee. We didn't really speak. He would play some music for me. And somehow I was just really gravitated to this. And in the evenings, he started inviting me to go to gems, which is where people were playing music and doing prayers. I started meeting Babas. Eventually, they invited me to go live with them. And so there would be different Sufi Babas coming to stay at the house, and I would get to meet people. They would read to me prayers in Farsi and Arabic and Turkish and music from all these places. And then I said, okay, something said it was time to move on for me. So I went to India and I studied with the Bowels, and my interest in what I had just been exposed to, the music and the prayers grounded in Islam, in Sufism, was something I carried with me over there. And that also influenced my time of learning music. And also within the Baul tradition, there are Sufi Bowels. They're called Baul Fakiris. And while I was studying mainly with Hindu practitioners, Vaishnava Bowels, I was drawn more and more to maybe return to investigate this more. And I ended up coming back, and now I've been here over a year, having wanting to put my roots down here, because I feel there's something that I still have to learn, a lot actually. And during that time, during the past 2 years, I started reading Quran a lot since I came here. And it's something that I wanted to break into, I guess, my whole life, but I didn't have the right time. And I would say that there are some books that take a while also to come to, because culturally, linguistically, all these things, it's not always the information, the way that we're used to taking in information. And another thing is that Islam is a lot about submission, which is something I wasn't ready to accept, even that word, for a long time. I started off in Buddhism about, cleansing the thoughts, and Hinduism and different traditions that were much more about sort of like emptying and cleansing. And from there, something allowed me to take up a little bit more this idea of submission, because at the beginning of my path, I was not ready to just say, yes, I'm ready. I have pride and ego and this Western individuality. So I think it took me a while to open up a little bit. And I wouldn't say that this is the same for everyone. That's my process. And now I also think that I come to even a text like the Holy Book in Islam with even what you could say a Western perspective, where I didn't, although my parents were affected by some of the misinterpretations or the violence that are associated, with the book or with the religion, this is not something I grew up with. And so I was able to now open the book, and it is an open book, you know? I'm reading it and giving it also my best when I read it, and saying that I don't think that this is harming me, and I'm not harming the words that are written here, and creating this sort of relationship, which I think is really important when we look at wisdom traditions and religions. We have to say, it's what I bring to it and my intention and my love that also shapes the experience.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story, because some key elements I'd like to bring out of that are, one, the music and the poetry and the way that you were coming in from a place of beauty. And I find that beauty to be essential to the process of surrender. In my own journey, surrender and submission are not so different. I've sort of lived with surrender as a major foundation in my own spiritual experience for so many years. I just felt, even as a child reading the Bible, that surrender is what it was all about, in terms of surrendering myself to a much bigger movement. And submission has these different layers to it. And as Western women, the idea of submission is really on its outer husk, not what we're brought up with, and how we've been raised to be so independent, which I wouldn't want to give up. But submission is actually a much richer concept, and the inside of that husk is like a grain with the oil in there, full of life. So this life, this oil of life within the holy book of Quran, within Islam, or within any of the traditions, in your experience, is brought about by your intention and the way you approach it. And thank you so much for saying that, because this, in addition to planting seeds together, in addition to attending to water, in addition to an intention to come together, it's this willingness to go to the seed of life within whatever tradition our neighbor carries that allows us to come to peace. This coming without judgment, without love. It says, actually, it's what truth can be revealed from this? I really appreciate the way you've brought that through, Katherine.
Thank you so much. I just want to bring in something that's said repeatedly in Quran, which is a wonderful thing to sit with. It says, basically, you're silly if you think you're self-sufficient, if you think that you're independent. And this is similar ideas. We can say, yes, I'm independent and I'm self-sufficient and I earn my income and I do my work and I have my family and this way. But these things are also given to us as gifts, and everything that comes in is a gift, and everything that goes out is a gift. And these are things that are hard to conceptualize. But this is the element of submission and of self-sufficiency, is that even the breath is a gift, the fact that it's ongoing in and out. And as we are in this world, we're dealing with these very difficult times, not knowing and having so much uncertainty. This is the rope that we hang on to, is knowing that I am not sufficient myself. I'm not what is bringing the air in and out of my body. And I must be grateful for this, and I find gratefulness in this, and also there's awe, and this is where that comes from. Thank
you. It's such a rich understanding of gratitude. an opening to wonder. And an opening to wonder is a part of the mystery traditions and the experience of mysticism, which so many are craving, and which is a delight to receive, because it is a gift. It's always a gift. We can show up to our meditations. We can show up to our life, our family, our job. But it's only grace that brings that sense of wonder and that sense of peace and the very breath whole in us. Really, you've given me so much to rest with and to enliven my heart today. It's been such a joy speaking with you, Katherine.
Thank you so much. For me too.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel led to share or talk about that I may not have mentioned?
I feel just compelled to say that in this moment we must help each other and love each other and forgive each other and forgive ourselves, because we don't always know where these hard feelings are that come from sometimes. Sometimes our hearts are magnets and we pick up on things that are so far away. And there is this process that we do need to separate sometimes what is mine, what is not, what is good to keep. And at the same time, we see that in ourselves and know that many people are feeling this too. So it's a great time to practice these foundations of our paths, which is just forgiving this difficulty.
Yeah. Hafiz, a poet from Persia, has a poem translated into English about forgive the dream. And I think about this all the time, and I'll paraphrase it because I don't have it memorized. But it says, one day, God and love will become real enough that it will allow you to forgive the dream. It begins, I see in you the wounds that have not healed. One day, God and love will become real enough.
SubhanAllah.
Forgiveness is again foundational in many traditions, and there are so many places where we can meet, not only in the heart of love and the land and the water, but forgiveness is essential. It's what Jesus Christ spoke of. It's in the North American tradition, indigenous traditions. It's a huge part of every true spiritual path. So thank you so much, Katherine. It's been such a joy. I know that you play music. Would you like to play a song for us? I've had your song running in my head for days. Bum bum ba da 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 bum bum. I would personally just love a chance to hear it.
Let me see. I have to take out my instrument.
Oh.
Okay. I'm gonna play a song that's... I will not sing the words to it, but it's still a nice song. Just a page of it or so. It's called Huzam Mevlevi Ayani, and it's called the first piece, the first hello, the Birinci Salam. Just a taste.
Just a taste. It's so beautiful. It's such a delight to watch your music grow.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and such a delight to know you and to see the beauty that you bring to everything you touch. It's just such a joy to be connected around this current project in Turkey and to have the opportunity to share time with you.
Thank you so much. It was amazing to meet you on your visit here, and I still feel like I'm communicating with you. Thank you so much. And for the same with you, I learned this from you too, is everything you touch, everyone you touch, you bring that beauty and that love to.
I can feel my heart just whirring and purring and being on fire. So, if people would like to know more about your current project happening with the Rafi community in Turkey, or they would like to contact you about any of these topics or any of your work, how might they reach you?
The first for the project is on Instagram. We post to a page called Rose Country Farm. And this is the best way for now to know some updates. And I will try to do better at just giving some narrations and photos, especially as the season changes. And then for conversation or contact is by email is the best thing, and that's my full name, Katherine Hreib @gmail.com. So we can share that.
Yeah, I'll put it in the comments. I know people are particularly interested in Sufism, in community, and in agriculture, permaculture, and no-dig farming. So may the conversation really widen, and may the seeds of the love we've shown today just plant themselves in the ground to spring up as beautiful flowers.
Yes, may we follow God's divine will and live with grace. And may we see these plants blooming, as you said. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katherine. This has been Building for Peace with Hannah Jewell. Thank you for joining us today, and I shall see you on the next episode.